chapter 19. We have this interesting little interaction with Zherkov, and also this little bit of this conflict and a battle of wills between this general and this colonel. But I'm going to skip that right to Rostov, and I'm interested to see how Rostov's emotions, his intuitions, his convictions, all these things get intermingled, and there's this kind of like overload of sensory input as his regiment enters the battle. Similar but a little bit different than when he was on the bridge. The squadron in which Rostov was serving had scarcely time to mount before it was halted, facing the enemy. With nothing between them but that terrible line of uncertainty and fear, like the line dividing the living from the dead. All were conscious of this line, and the question whether they would cross it or not, and how they would cross it, agitated them all. If only they would be quick, thought Rostov, feeling that at last the time had come to experience the joys of an attack, of which he had heard so much from his fellow hussars. And then Denisov, his commanding officer, we don't hear the commander above Denisov giving an attack, but it's just like Denisov, voice rang out, "Forward, lads!" And then the horses began to trot, and there's this sentence just further on. And Rostov felt Rook's flanks go down as he broke into a gallop. And it's interesting to me, it's described here. It's Rook that's taking off, and Rostov is feeling him. It wasn't. And Rostov gave Rook the command to go. In me, it's kind of just this subtle play of this kind of, this inevitability carrying these men along. And especially as we see all of Rostov's emotions in this, he's not a man choosing any of these things. They're arising to him, they're coming to him in this intense experience. He anticipated his horse's movements and became more elated. He had noticed a solitary tree ahead. At first, this tree had stood in the middle of the line that had seemed so terrible. But now he crossed that line, and not only was there nothing terrible, but everything was becoming more joyous and exciting. And then it appears that Rook, the horse, is hit, and Rostov falls down, and this is where he kind of just, again, he loses it in terms of he can't quite figure out what's going on, in a sense. And we see his confusion. What is it? I am not moving. I've fallen. I am killed. Rostov asked himself these questions and answered them in the same instant. And then he gets himself free from the fallen horse. And his arm, I think it's his left arm, is badly injured or broken or something like this. Now where, on which side, is the line that had so sharply divided the two armies? So he's talking to himself, just before, he saw this tree, saw the enemy, and now it's just a little bit confusing for him. Can something bad have happened to me? Do such things happen? And what is one to do in such cases? The previous few chapters we've been talking about the education of Prince Andrei, and how with his strategic mind, his commitment to intelligence, and using that as his kind of main character quality to try to navigate life and answer questions. And he's coming up against the chaos of war, and watching Bagration, he's not directing any of it, and how Andrei's becoming educated. So here's a different sort of education with Rostov. Rostov, the more idealistic, the more emotional, the more hurrah kind of guy. And he's thrust into this situation again. This is the second time, and he's coming up, his convictions and his intuitions and everything that's kind of all about his identity is being challenged again. Can something bad happen to me? Do such things happen? There are some people, he thought joyfully, seeing several men running toward him. They will help me. And these are the French. But that's, he doesn't recognize that. His intuitions in this intense emotional experience rise to the surface, and that's kind of what it's been his whole life. People have helped him and kind of honored him and kind of loved him. And so there's this whole scene of these French soldiers coming closer and closer to him. Can they coming for me? Really coming for me? And why? To kill me? Me, whom everyone loves? He recalled his mother's love for him, the love of his family and friends, and the intention of the enemy to kill him seemed impossible. We might, and we could be right, we're not wrong, to say Rostov's like extremely naive young man. But it would be, I think, too harsh just to paint that brush all over him. He's a young man, he's grown up in the conditions he has, and he's in this situation, and he's obviously being educated, you could say. And a lot of his naive ideas about war are being challenged. But we can't forget the intensity, the intense emotion of the situation. And just the chaos and the literally being right at the brink of perhaps death and confronting an enemy like that. There's a chaos and just near and around him, kind of tragedy of men dying that isn't right described yet. And so still in this novel, very often we've come up to these battles and it's either just been right at the anticipation of it or right at the very edge of it, and we haven't sort of crossed that other side, except glimpses of seeing, remember the Russian army retreating, just disheveled and chaotic and much more like a mob of an army retreating, compared to those fresh soldiers getting near the front line as Andrei did that one time. And so Rostov's having a bit of trouble here with the French. And he starts running away, and he grabbed his pistol, but instead of firing it at the Frenchman, he just flung it at him and ran with all his might toward the bushes, retreating. There's some bushes in a forest nearby. There must be some mistake, he thought. It cannot be that they meant to kill me. Meanwhile, his left arm felt as heavy as if 100-pound weight were hanging from it. He could run no farther. The Frenchman also stopped and took aim. Rostov frowned and bent low. One bullet, then another whistled past. He mustered his remaining strength, took his left hand in his right, and ran up to the bushes. And in those bushes were the Russian sharpshooters. And so, Rostov avoided the bullet there. And even in that, there's sort of a theme or sort of a messaging in it. Just this chance, just this fate, And I'm kind of interested to see Rostov's further sort of processing of this. I think, to be fair, it takes a while for us to kind of change our minds. There can be times when we have this just dramatic moment in their lives. There's not many, but you have this dramatic, or maybe it's some emotionally intense thing, and it really stands as a beacon in your mind. That's when you changed your idea about this, or you grew to be a more patient person, or what have you. So both for Andrei and Rostov, it's going to be interesting to see how quickly or how slowly, if at all, how they change as people. And the battle's not over, but that's the end of chapter 19.